All right. Now it's time for some Joe Louisology. And we're going to lead this tape out with an interview from Joe Louis, and then we're going to look at some highlights. That's right. So this is, we got Aliology, Tysonology, Bruce Leeology, Magicology, Birdology, Jordanology, and then we got Rocky Marcianoology, and we got now Joe Louisology. And what I'm showing on this channel is like I amology equals Heartology equals Jouology. I am is all of us. Like before Abraham was, I am. Before Mike Tyson was, Muhammad Ali, I am. Before Ali was, I am. Before Joe Louis was, I am. Before Rocky Marciano was, I am. Before Bird was, I am. Before Magic was, I am. So I am is wearing all these garments as each one of these wonderful, famous, powerful, memorable athletes. And even I am before the audience and the fans were I am. All one I am appearing as many entertainers and supporting audiences. So that's what I Am publication is about, and that's what our I Amology series is about. And now we're showing you I Am in the form of entertainers and fans. So those of you who have businesses, we do market businesses here. You see videos showing I Amology as a great service and a business that I am providing as what appears to be someone. And I am as consumers and customers and patrons to that business and businesses. So this is the whole focus of I Am publication, and you'll see a series of I Amology videos featuring and with our speakers speaking about I Amology, just giving you another whole different view of what I Am is in a non-religious, non-traditional, non-religious, joyful, happy, fun conversation. And again, being a minister, pastor, or a preacher is not the focus here, but the regular, everyday I Amness that's happening that many are not paying attention as and to, and that's what we create in awareness on this channel for. So with no further delay, Joe Louis.
Now listen, Joe. We ask you questions, and all you've got to do is answer, see? Well, after a bit, Joe does get the idea. And is that boy bright?
Joe, how do you rate? What do you think of Galento for just toughness?
Well, Galento, I think he's just as tough as anybody ever fought. I think he's good in game, very tough. Take a punch at the best of anybody I think I ever hit.
Joe, do you think you can knock Tony out again?
Well, I don't know if I can knock him out again, but I could try awful hard.
It seems quite safe. We'll have a go at this. Put your head on, Joe. See, that's too easy. Thanks a lot, Joe. Now listen.
All right, so
because of this amazing record, the sporting press has nicknamed Louis the Brown Bomber.
Before Jackie Robinson.
Now let's look at some highlights provided by Board Films. Thank you, Board Films, for these wonderful highlights that we're featuring here at I Am Publications. With no further delay, excuse me, Joe Louis.
Or Muhammad Ali, there was Joe Louis.
Boxing's Brown Bomber was a champion's champion. Known as the Brown Bomber for his punch and string of knockout victories. A great inspiration in so many ways to so many people.
The Brown Bomber.
Greatest heavyweight of all time. It's going to be Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber.
Born in Alabama in 1914, Louis's parents were sharecroppers.
He was around at a time when this country didn't treat black people properly. Yeah.
There are about 9 million Negroes in our southern states, and the majority of them live on farms.
Long and blistering days working the fields hardened the young Louis. His father was committed to an asylum early in Joe's life, so his mother moved the family to Detroit. It was here, at age 15, he discovered boxing. He won the Golden Gloves and turned pro.
People don't realize how many times he fought as an amateur. He fought over 50 times, won a Gold Glove, and found that area of competence that all kids are looking for.
Louis fought and won 23 fights in his first year as a pro, knocking out all but 4.
Backing off, only courage keeping him up. Another good right hand by Louis, and another! And down goes Alator.
He was one of the most balanced fighters I ever saw, Ken. Always in position with his footwork.
There's that left hook.
Joe Louis has been faster.
And sword draped on the rope. He's being counted out.
He's just so pragmatic and just so delivering. He just turning his blood like he's breathing. He's a master.
I think he was the best heavyweight that I ever saw in my life.
Joe Louis goes on to win another in his march to the World Heavyweight Championship.
His management came up with the brilliant strategy to grow Louis's name. He would fight in the hometown of almost all of his opponents, giving the home crowd a chance to see their fighters stop this mythical brown bomber. As a result, Louis set record gates at most every fight he had.
I am the king. I am in the greatest shape in my life, and I'm going out to beat Joe Louis.
That's what he did.
Turn back the clock to 1935. That clean, good-looking colored boy is Joe Louis. His opponent, King Levinsky. Levinsky is seasoned gladiator, cocky, and assured ways to his battle.
Louis tore through the division, a true first of his kind.
You can see that even now, the word was out. This guy Louis is a killer. Stay away, stay away. Levinsky is scared to death.
He never gloated. He never boasted. He didn't stand over his defeated foes. All of this was part of the image he knew he needed if he ever hoped to get a title shot. The press treated black fighters as horribly as you'd imagine they would in the 30s.
Boxing writers in particular delighted in devising nicknames for the new black prospect.
You see, there had only ever been one black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson.
Just seconds before the police stopped the motion picture cameras and entered the ring to halt this very one-sided fight. Jack Johnson becomes heavyweight champion of the world.
But white America found Johnson offensive.
Johnson had been despised by white America.
He was loud and arrogant, and even dared to have affairs with white women.
Because of this, black boxers were frozen out of title shots for 29 years.
Discrimination was very prominent in those years.
There was almost a conspiracy not to let another black near the championship.
And Jack Blackburn really didn't want to train him, really didn't want to spend any time with him, because he didn't think he'd ever get a shot for the title, because he's black.
He famously told him, if you ever hope to be champion, you'll need to be twice as good as the competition.
His great trainer, Jack Blackburn, they were a great partnership.
This is Primo Carnera. He was a 6'7", 270-pound former champion.
Down he goes with a great violence. Down on the count. He's being counted out, and that's all. Primo Carnera wins it.
Shaft died 5 days later.
Carnera was seen as the representative of the Mussolini government.
World War II was just around the corner.
No, the sensational brown bomber from Detroit, and ex-heavyweight champion Primo Carnera.
Never out of position, and he was a great puncher with either hand, and he didn't waste anything.
No, that guy took somebody out right before he punches.
They were short, concise, explosive.
Now the third time. Carnera tells the referee he can't go on, it's all over. Joe Louis, the winner by a TKO.
Louis's victory over Mussolini's giant elevated him in the American public's eye.
He was the only black man that was portrayed in newspaper articles other than crimes.
Joe Louis was respected by everyone in the world. I mean, he was loved.
He was an idol of black America.
I've got a problem that I'm pretty sure you can help me with. Yes, you will be paid for helping me. Actually paid really, really well. Before you skip this video, let me
Proof that if given a real chance, they could compete and they could win.
Whatever he fought, the streets were on. Now, the minute the fight was over, you'd see hundreds of guys, and we would imagine it better than we ever saw it.
Max Baer was known as one of the hardest right-hand punchers in the history of the game. He was a former champion and a seasoned veteran.
I'm not making any prediction what round will knock the next guy out in, but I'm going to knock him out just as soon as possible.
In the midst of the Depression, Joe Louis versus Max Baer sold out Yankee Stadium. and cleared the first $1 million gate in over a decade.
Oh, I thought he was the turning point in boxing. There was a moment in time when a fighter threw punches that you didn't see and the other man fell. And then we knew it had become the sweet science.
Joe Louis, a very, very economical mover, wastes very little, very hard puncher too.
A true practitioner of the sweet science.
And he's gone down now from the right to the chin. Slow motion fall there to Maxi Bear.
And it was the greatest finisher maybe of all time in the heavyweight division. Not maybe, he was. He got you hurt, he got rid of you. He got you out of there. You didn't get a second chance.
Joe Louis dropped it 4 times in 4 rounds.
A fourth round winner by knockout impressively as a Maxi Bear. Didn't he do well?
Pressure was mounting to grant Louis a title shot, but there were many who still could not accept a black fighter. He was passed over again and again.
21-year-old Joe Louis, the overnight sensation of the heavyweight division, beats highly regarded Charles Wrestler.
Louis fought everyone who was out there. It's not Louis's fault that he was so much better than they were.
Louis was a devastating counterpuncher.
Powerful.
Yeah. You should see this punch, man.
Likely will put the crowd into the canvas. He fought courageously getting to his feet. Louis, who already had a reputation for never letting his man get away, moves in to finish him.
He stalked the guy. He was calm, his demeanor, real calm all the time, to the body, to the head. Oh, boy, oh boy.
His dominance in the ring and unquestionable character outside of it made Joe the first black sports superstar in the world. Just one more hurdle lingered before they'd have to give Louis his title shot. Max Schmeling.
Schmeling was a hell of a fighter. Joe Louis was the ground bomber. He was coming up. He was undefeated.
Schmeling had studied film of Louis, a privilege not afforded to most fighters in this era.
The great famous saying from that fight, again, before the fight, where Schmeling, a German fighter, said, "I see something."
Max, from watching Joe Louis in pictures and in action, have you discovered any particular weakness in the brown bomber? Yes, I did. But there would too.
Was that when Louis threw his jab, he brought it back low.
That happened all the time. He was always doing that. But no one else was able to take advantage of it because Louis was so fast.
And what he saw was that Louis would jab and he would leave. You should never leave your head on the right side.
He noticed a flaw in the brown bomber's style.
Schmeling had noticed that he was vulnerable to right hands.
Schmeling was precisely the type of skilled and crafty veteran who could exploit it.
Schmeling was a great fighter. And he was a real good puncher. Accurate puncher. And he took advantage of that.
Joe Louis is down. The Louis is Joe and made Louis give ground, and there Schmeling straightened up Louis with hard right and left to the jaw. He has puffed up Louis's left knee.
A dynamite right, and Louis goes down. Max Schmeling puts a temporary halt to the meteoric rise of the brown bomber Joe Louis.
The Louis defeat made Max Schmeling next in line for a title shot.
The Brown Bomber won his first 28 fights before being knocked out by Max Schmeling, a former world heavyweight champion from West Germany.
Now here's something funny. Joe Louis was continuously passed over for title shots because he was a black fighter. However, Max Schmeling was viewed as Hitler's poster boy.
One of the fears was that Schmeling would win the title from James Hitler. Jay Braddock. Take the belt home to Nazi Germany and nobody would see it again.
So
were you recently injured in a car accident? Look at this check for $160,000. If you're looking to get money your
So America was stuck between a rock and a hard place. A title fight between Joe Louis and Jim Braddock was made, passing over Max Schmeling. Though Louis had to sign away 10% of all his future purses to Braddock.
Braddock's manager basically made Louis agree to give him a percentage of his purses for the rest of his career to get the fight.
What?
Yeah, but there was an understanding that, you know, you're not getting a fight otherwise.
For the first time in 29 years, a black fighter would get a shot at the heavyweight title.
And now, here in Chicago, the heavyweight boxing title is at stake. Will Joe Louis walk out of the ring as heavyweight champion of the world? We'll soon know.
There were history of black families, you know, poor black families that would get hope from just saying, hey, Louis did it. I don't want to hear that you can't do this. Joe Louis did it.
A challenger from Detroit, Joe Louis.
And so he was that important. That's the only point I'm making here. He was that freaking important that what they fought, what they did, what they overcame, where they came from. When you talk about all the things that we're here to talk about character, about talent, about perseverance, about resiliency, about caring about more than yourself, about strength. When you talk about all those things that we try to say that we care about, he was all that. He was all of that.
The Brown Bomber had captured the heavyweight title. He was champion at last.
A living legend, the heavyweight champion of the world, from Detroit, Michigan, the immortal Joe Louis.
The most powerful individual in the world, the strongest individual in the world. A black man was once again the heavyweight champion of the world.
In the black community, he was more than a hero. He was the shining example of overcoming the odds.
Joe Louis wears the crown of all the heavyweights, despite the arguments as to whether he is the real champion or not.
Yeah, he wins the title. And of course, the biggest sport in the country. So all the press is there, and they're, Joe, you're the champion was. Not yet. Not till I beat that man. He didn't even have to say his name.
That man was Max Schmeling. Joe refused to call himself a champion until he avenged his only defeat.
Joe Louis defends his World Heavyweight Championship against former title holder Max Schmeling, the only man who has ever defeated the champion.
Louis secluded himself into training. He knew, as did everyone else, that this fight was the most important of his life. Viewed as a battle of nations, politics, ideas. Boxing is war individualized. Pitting man against man.
The heavyweight championship, its meaning was transcending pure supremacy in the ring. Its meaning was really that of a world beater.
German troops marched into Austria for what the Germans called the reunification of the two countries.
Everybody recognized what Schmeling represented.
The stage is set for their historic rematch.
The match had become more than sport. War was coming.
On the verge of World War II, with Hitler, a madman, trying to create a master race, take over the world. I mean, the whole world's watching. You talk about pressure. That's why Louis is the greatest.
Yankee Stadium, New York City.
If he didn't win this world title fight against Max Schmeling, he was ruined.
And it's in Yankee Stadium outdoors. I mean, you talk about a setting, a stage.
The eyes of the world would watch the clash. The gate was the biggest ever for a boxing match.
The whole freaking world's watching. The President of the United States, it calls up Louis and says, you got a witness for the good guys. I mean, you talk about pressure.
A black fighter carried the hopes of the free world.
Famous Detroit Brown Bomber, world heavyweight champion, Joe Louis.
The largest audience in the history for a single radio broadcast tuned in.
U.S. against Germany, black guy against a white guy. You couldn't draw more divisive lines at those times.
It was a watershed moment that transcended sport.
That he's got to save basically the United States and the world from scourge and disease of the Nazi party.
For one night, Joe Louis had united the free world under a single cause.
A crushing right explodes off Schmelling's jaw. Joe steps back.
And Schmeling was in fear right from the beginning. He realized that this is something else, a different cut of cattle.
How does he respond to it? He destroys him, he annihilates him. He knocks him out in one round.
A left up to the jaw, and Schmeling is down.
That to me is one of the best stories of a heavyweight fight.
Schmeling fell victim to the Brown Bombers blitzkrieg.
I think that's the greatest single event in the history of the world.
It doesn't look like Schmelling's going to make it. It's all over. Joe Louis electrifies the boxing world with his magnificent first-round devastating knockout over
Louis's victory electrified the country.
And Joe Louis and Benny Leonard, they were fighters. They let people know they had value, that their race had value, their people had value. They had value. They pulled people out of those places.
It was the most uniting force I've ever seen in my life.
He began his historic run of 25 straight title defenses.
Running your business can be overwhelming. Discover HoneyBook, the project.
22 by way of knockout.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The White House has just announced that the Japanese are attacking military and naval establishments on the island of Oahu.
In 1942, with America firmly involved in World War II, he enlisted in the Army.
I've only done what any red-blooded American would do.
During the war years, Joe Louis fought some 96 fights all over the world. It was said that some 5 million servicemen had a chance to see the champion box.
Louis's ring career was never interrupted, not even for World War II, when he staged exhibitions under the claim, "I'm not fighting for nothing, I'm fighting for my country."
He frequently donated his entire purse to the Army or Navy Emergency Relief Fund. An act of kindness that would haunt him.
Here we are in Madison Square Garden for the Joe Louis Abe Simon Heavyweight Championship bout. Private Joe Louis Sparrow reports for duty. Duty in this case means that he is defending his $1 million World's Heavyweight Championship and donating his entire purse to the Army Emergency Relief. Joe's mad now, and he shows it. Fighting mad. He's throwing dynamite.
And Joe always had a heart of gold. During that time, it was not on just one occasion that when a loved one died, Joe would pick up the funeral expenses for a fellow serviceman.
Here it comes now.
Wow. Joe Louis is an incredible fighter and individual.
A great soldier, a great champion, and a great man.
There's Joe Louis, once again, his hand raised in triumph.
Never before and probably never again has a champion donated his entire purse, in this instance around $70,000, in the bright and brave cause of patriotism.
The IRS would come at Louis years later, saying he owed millions on these donations. Louis would suffer financial ruin from this for the remainder of his life.
This World Heavyweight Championship for the benefit of the Navy Relief Fund.
All these fights for the troops, sacrificing so much to be an example for the country, and he was ultimately left penniless as a result.
And he's gone over. Billy Khan on the floor in round 13.
Well, I'm not waiting for nothing. I'm waiting for my country, and I think that's about the greatest piece of work that anybody can do.
The heavyweight king, Joe Louis.
Joe Louis was an authentic hero as opposed to a surplus hero. In all, Louis spent 17 years in the ring, 12 reigning as heavyweight champion.
Now it's Joe Louis, the brown bomber at his dynamite best.
The war was over.
But the forces of Germany have surrendered.
Louis had now been champion 10 years. Father Time is undefeated, and many were speculating when it would come for Louis.
Between the champion, Joe Louis, and his challenger, Jersey Joe Walcott.
The super fight brought out all the celebrities.
And from Hollywood, Jack Benny and Bob Hope, Eddie Cantor, Joan Blondell, and producer Mike Todd, and FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover. Boom, perfect timing for the heavyweight championship of the world. Champion Joe Louis in the black trunks. Challenger Jersey Joe Walcott in the white trunks.
Win, lose, or draw, Louis had stated his intent to retire following this fight.
Walker is out in front. He's knocked Joe Louis down. And the crowd, the big crowd of Yankee Stadium now is really on the edge of the seat.
Walcott was ahead on points.
Watch Joe Louis, the devastating Joe Louis of old. Raining punches. Now, in slow motion, here's the champion in all his fighting fury.
Louis delivered the perfect combination and put Jersey Joe down for the count.
He's in real trouble now, and the fight is over. In Joe Louis, 25th title defense, he looks like the great champion of all.
He had now defended his title 25 times, an unmatched record that stands to this day.
Is the retirement of Joe Louis, for 11 years heavyweight champion of the world. He has defended the championship 25 times since winning it from Jimmy Braddock in 1937.
It started when he donated 2 purses, one to the Navy and the Army Relief Fund, and they wrote the checks to Joe Louis. And he immediately signed the checks to the Navy and the Army Relief Fund. But because they were made payable to Joe Louis, they wanted him to pay taxes on it. Could the IRS have made an exception? Yes. Could they have interpreted it differently? Yes.
After 2 years in retirement, Louis was faced with massive financial problems.
We were away for 2 years. I was 2 years. And the income tax has also had something to do with me coming back too, right? We never had a good payday.
The Brown Bomber was desperate, and so he returned.
Winner by unanimous decision and heavyweight champion of the world, Ezzard Charles.
He fought and lost by decision to Ezzard Charles, but his financial problems still lingered, and so he accepted the biggest payday he could find against an up-and-coming Rocky Marciano.
At 184 pounds, Rocky Marciano versus at 210 pounds, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis.
Louis has 3 inches on Marciano in height and 9 inches in reach.
He had no subtlety. He had a Susie Q. The greatest right hand in the history of boxing.
Marciano's right is his most damaging weapon.
And Joe Louis said, he doesn't really fight by the book, but I got hit by a library tonight.
Marciano's the slugger type of fighter. His arms are unusually short for a heavyweight, but he's strong and he's powerful.
You can compare him to a street fighter with a huge heart, and he never lost.
His career finally came to an end when he met Rocky Marciano in 1951. Marciano knocked him up in the 8th round.
Marciano's hard left hook sends Louis crawling to the canvas.
It was immediately clear that Marciano's power was too much for Louis.
Now watch, a left, another left crumples Louis, a blazing right.
Marciano was known like
unbelievable strength in his punches, like
Yeah.
he did just.
Rocky Marciano had something that you can't teach people.
Which is just
brutal
brute
power.
strength.
Brutal power. He just had the ability to land these bone-crushing shots.
The fight would be a passing of the torch moment from one legendary champion to the next.
Seeing the great Joe Louis defeated, ending up his career that way, I think at that moment it might have influenced me in retiring maybe a year before I would.
A tragic and sad ending to the career of perhaps the greatest of all time. He would spend the rest of his life doing everything possible to repay the debt, including participating in a wrestling match for $100,000.
In Washington, the Bomber takes on cowboy Rocky Lee, 320 pounds. After 10 minutes of tugging, hauling, and poking, a right forearm smash sends Lee out of the ring. And the winner is Joe Louis.
Despite this final payday, Louis was still deeply in debt. He couldn't catch up to the IRS, who were charging him $50,000 a year in interest alone. He ultimately found a home at Caesar's Palace in Vegas.
How long have you been working here at Caesar's as a greeter?
7 years. Where he lived and worked until he died at age 66.
Today, America lost one of the finest boxers of all times. Joe Louis died of heart failure today in Las Vegas. He was 66 years old.
An emotional service in memory of the former heavyweight boxing champion Joe Louis, who died of a heart attack last Sunday.
He was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors.
Former heavyweight champions Jersey Joe Walcott, Joe Frazier,